serious? Hey Reddit, what was your thank god I looked at the contract moment? My husband, then fiancé, was getting ready to buy a used car that's often used for street racing / rally racing. He doesn't do that, but it's a damn fun car to drive, and is pretty much sure to have aftermarket modifications if it's been owned by someone who used it for racing, or as a status symbol. My husband had done his research and neither of us were going to be taken for a ride, and even though this was the car we absolutely wanted, we were prepared to walk away. It was fairly low mileage. The dealer, a third-party outfit, not a brand dealership, kept swearing up and down that the car was still under manufacturer's warranty and had no aftermarket mods. I was skeptical. I knew that if the car had any aftermarket mods, the warranty would be void for that portion of the car, if not the whole thing, depending on the extent of the influence of the mods. I read every piece of paperwork they wanted my husband to sign and explained them to him, but I couldn't find anything that guaranteed that the car was still under manufacturer's warranty. So I straight up told him to walk away from the deal unless they gave us a piece of paper that both parties signed that said exactly that. They did it. Lo and behold, the car had an aftermarket downpipe, a really nice one that had been installed improperly. It was affecting the airflow through the engine and could have eventually caused permanent damage to the engine. It was going to cost us hundreds of dollars to either have it reinstalled properly or return the engine to its original, unmodified state, which would give us warranty compliance. Yay. But, surprise, as hell s, we had a piece of paper that gave us a hold on their balls. They tried to avoid us for a week or so, until we left them a voicemail saying that if we didn't hear from them in 24 hours, they'd be hearing from our lawyer, and that's how we didn't pay for having the car restored to warranty specs. We even got to keep the downpipe. It's kinda spiffy. Edit. The car is a Mazda Speed 3. Mine wasn't really extreme, but my girlfriend and I were shopping for houses and we were checking out a townhouse style condominium. The price was within our budget and the monthly maintenance fees were average for the area. It was an open house event hosted by a retailer, so the property's annual expenses were included in a pamphlet. I found that on top of the regular monthly maintenance fees, around $350, there was an additional expense of $800 every 6 months. I asked why there was an additional expense if there were already regular fees. She responded that the extra $1,600 per year was used to keep the fees low. I responded that the fees are average for the area and many places in the same neighborhood are already lower. Long story short, it was a nice house, but we didn't pursue it further. I'm on board with the idea of condo fees if they cover things that I would normally pay for, like heat/water, snow removal, garden care, etc. And if needed, additional expenses for major upgrades like new roofs or doors/windows. But expecting 12 houses in the row complex to each kick in a $1,600 bonus every year without specific accountability isn't something that interests me. We bought a new RV and received a coupon for 3 free nights at a luxury RV campground park. Of course, to receive the free nights we had to sit down with salespeople trying to sell us a membership first. My ex was very gullible and gobbled up the free cookies and sales pitch after they showed us the beautiful photos of their campgrounds all over the state. There were many promises made of ocean views, clubhouses, swimming pools, etc. I was young, and he was definitely the one in charge at the time, so next thing I know, the 3 free nights turns into a full-blown membership with extremely pricey annual fees. But now we can camp anywhere anytime, right? We head out that weekend to the dedicated property for the free nights and it's an absolute shithole. There is no ocean view, the pool is covered in scum, the clubhouse has the smell of mismanaged senior home with 3 residents staring at us oddly. Basically it's a gravel-lined trailer park for people who live in their RVs. I'm pissed. The kids are sad and trying to play on the rusty swing set. We bailed out that night after driving 3 hours and the next morning he tried to cancel. They had told us we could cancel anytime. Yeah, right. After rereading the contract, this was a lifetime membership and you could not cancel it without following their exact fine print instructions of cancellation via certified mail written in the blood of your firstborn. It also had to be done within 48 hours of signing. These assholes send people away for 3 days to a dump, so when you come back you're contracted for life like a timeshare. Lucky for us, my beach fit got us home within 24 hours, wrote up their ridiculous demands for cancellation and booyard right out of there. Then they tried to not refund us despite it all, and I threatened them with litigation, so they finally did. I have a scathing Yelp review about them that gets regular votes for being useful and funny. They recently tried to get it removed and failed. Suck it, you dirty rotten leeches. Looked at renting a house about 7 years ago, and the homeowner had inserted some of her own clauses into the standard tenancy agreement. Now this is absolutely fine to do, but they were purposefully put into different sections of the document. So if you read the part detailing security deposit, you wouldn't see her additions as she put them in another area on the paperwork. Point 1 clause was that no footwear of any kind can be worn inside the property. Failure to adhere to this will mean the whole property's carpeting must be professionally cleaned. Point another was the waiving of the mandatory notice period before the homeowner can come by and inspect the property. There's supposed to be a minimum amount of time they must give you notice-wise before they can come over unless there is a serious property fault, leaky CT, so that they can't just turn up unannounced. She wanted that waived so she could check we were treating her property right, and if we weren't then we'd be immediately evicted. I also caught her telling a relative that she registers eviction proceedings upon the start of the tenancy, so she can evict them as soon as she decides they've broken her rules. There was a mandatory waiting period between commencement of eviction proceedings and being able to actually get enforcement officers to evict a tenant. Not sure of the current rules on this anymore, as I don't have as much to do with rental properties now. Noped out of that house really quickly and got a much bigger, cheaper house, albeit more of a death trap, a few streets away. Bit long, but satisfying, to me at least, was leasing with a big apartment company, where I had a garage along with my apartment. The lease contracts they cook up are 20+ pages long and naturally slanted heavily in their favor, and they use them as clubs against their tenants. Generally scummy behavior all around. They removed the restricted access gates because they were tired of maintaining them and kept advertising it anyway, etc. So the contract comes up for renewal, and they of course raise the rent on both the apartment and the garage, counting on inertia to keep me there, even though they're blatantly advertising a lower rate on the same model for new leases. Now at this point I'm planning on leaving in a year anyway to buy my house, so I swallow it and tell them to write up the contract for me to review. I sit down and read the thing and notice they've clearly left the garage fee off the contract, even though it's noted as being leased. I bite my tongue and read it over, and yes, according to the paperwork the sum total of everything was the price of just the apartment, and the total is less than what I paid the previous year. I sign it, fully expecting to hear back that they made a mistake before the property manager countersigns it. A few days later, I get my fully executed contract on my doorstep. Now the fun begins. I wait until the bill shows up on their payment website and call them up saying there seems to be some mistake. You're charging me $X when my lease is for $Y. Please correct. They tell me they'll review. A couple days later, they call to say, oh, it's just a mistake in the paperwork. You can either pay the full amount or we can take the garage off your lease. Oh, no. My contract clearly states the apartment and the garage is this price. Please correct your billing. I paid them the amount owed per the contract on the first point. Now come the threats. Eviction. Delinquent payment. Going to affect credit. Corporate lawyers. Luckily, I have prepaid legal services through my work. I call up the lawyer they refer me to and send off the contract. He calls me back the next day and says you're absolutely right. They don't have a leg to stand on here. Get their attorney to provide you in writing what they believe their legal basis is for demanding more than what's in the contract and I'll take care of it. My favorite line in contracts like this is how they clearly state that it is the entirety of the agreement, so there's no chance of slipping in things on either side. The property manager calls me to come visit her in the office the same day and says she reviewed it with their attorney and he believes they're in the right because of generally advertised pricing or some other such nonsense. She also implied that the person who wrote the contract was in danger of losing their job because of the issue, as if she wasn't more liable for it for signing off on it. This is where I get to tell her I've also retained legal services and passed on what he said. The look on her face was priceless. She told me she'd take it back to them. End of the story. I received a very terse note dropped on my doorstep a day later saying they've removed the extra charge from my account. I'm happily living in my new house for 4 years now, but that still gives me a warm glow when I remember it. Edit. I live in a high cost of living area, so that detached one car garage would have cost me $1,800 for the year. Not surprisingly, nobody was fired for the contract screw up. Okay, this is just a piece of advice, because I know there are actors out there who want to get into the business. I'm a talent agent and entertainment lawyer. I cannot tell you how many contracts I read that include things that are not enforceable by law, or are just plain illegal, but actors are so happy to get an agent they sign without looking. Hire a faking lawyer. I used to charge $100 to read a contract when I still did it. It's worth it. Example, I had a client, let's call her Jess. Jess is an incredible talent in voiceover. She to this day is one of my best clients. However, when Jess was first starting about 8 years ago, she signed a contract with an agency out of Kansas City. 2 years later she left the agency and we picked her up and showed her our contract. She raised her eyebrows at our rates, asking, how do you guys make anything with such low commission rates? This, along with a few other things, made me ask if she had a copy of her old contract for me to read. So here we go. First, it stated that the agency's commission rate, percentage of actor earnings they get, was 45%. The industry standard, if you're union, it can legally be no higher than 10%, and usually never goes higher than 15% even for new talent that non-union. Second, it stated a non-compete clause that lasted for 3 years and covered the entire US and Canada. Not enforceable, and if I'm being honest, I could make a judge throw that out on a dime, but it would cost you a lot of money for me to do. Usually you don't find non-compete clauses in acting agencies other than a penalty for breaking your contract with us early, which in our agency we usually derive from an average of your earnings during the course of the current contract. Third, and this was a fun one, said that she could not deny appearing nude provided proper compensation. I was tempted to hammer this faking company after reading this. Jess was a very attractive woman, but that changes nothing. Let me be clear to all actors, you have every right to deny a job for any reason you choose. If your agency pushes you into something against your own choice, you call a lawyer or your union rep. If you have one point, there were about 5 other stupid things about ownership and her responsibilities, but those are the main ones. Nothing makes me more sick than agencies taking advantage of kids pursuing their dream. They are faking old age snake oil salesmen who only survive off the desperation of people who have dreams. Being an actor is tough and your agent is supposed to be on your side. It's an unwritten rule of the profession that, unless there are extreme circumstances, you hold the line with your client. That's literally the rules in my agency, and I've fired people for faking over actors for their own gain. I could go all day, but please, if you're ever in a situation as an actor or performer where there is a contract, just hire a lawyer to consult and have them read it. It doesn't cost much in the grand scale of what you could lose, and they will always help you, because if you're happy then you'll come back. If you need them. Edit. You type one post without your coffee and Detective Reddit starts screaming from the rooftops. I fixed the post, you dicks. I attended this college in 2011 and was supposed to have received my diploma the following year, as it was a 9-month program. I never received it. I had moved, so I'm assuming that it was returned to sender when they sent it to my old address. They never called me about it either, as I couldn't attend grad at the time for personal reasons. I was interested in applying for university a bit later because I found out that the college I had gone to wasn't a recognized institution. So upon applying for university, they wanted the transcript from sketchy school. I went down there and told them I needed my diploma from there and that I never had received a copy in the first place. The receptionist was rude and checked the back, only to tell me the original copy wasn't there and insisted that I needed to pay a fee of $35 to get it. I was pissed off because who the fuck charges a fee for a diploma you didn't receive? So I pay the $35, even though I thought it was bullshit. I really couldn't get over it after a while, So I rummaged through my documents I had signed when I first started the school program, and lo and behold I found a line that said the first copy or original of the diploma is no charge, but that they do charge for additional copies. I'm fine with that additional copy part, but not for the original. I called their office and explained how I was charged for my first copy of my diploma that I never received, and also complained about how the receptionist treated me when I had tried to explain to her several times and nicely that I had never received my original copy. The person I spoke to found the original copy that I didn't receive. She was understanding and apologetic and said I could come back to get it and a refund point. It was so satisfying coming back and seeing the pissy receptionist who basically had to admit she faked up. I realize she doesn't make the rules, but she really didn't have to be the way she was the first time around. I also know it's only $35, but I don't like being taken advantage of. Added paragraph breaks. A certain shady as fuck game publishing company offered to buy my RPG Maker game for $1,000 upfront, with no royalties or anything. I'd be basically signing away the game rights to them entirely. This didn't really seem like a bad idea at the time, since it took me less than a month to make the entire thing and I needed the money. However, in the contract, it also states that the publisher would be permitted to change the game in any way they saw fit without your consent. I was absolutely not cool with this. Plus, it turned out that they had given the exact same offer to dozens of other RPG Maker devs, some of which had only made glorified tech demos, and the publishers seemed really desperate and pushy to try and get me and as many other people as possible to sign. All of this combined caused me to decline the offer in the end. Said publishers would then send me several desperate emails encouraging me to take the offer, even after I made it firmly clear that I was not interested. Then, after I told my story on an RPG Maker forum and on Reddit about dealing with them, they made several legal threats against me and tried to blackmail me, which is why I'm not saying their name here. Anyway, some time passed after I finally managed to get the guy to fuck off, and I started seeing horror stories pop up on various websites about the kind of shit this company put these RPG Maker devs through, including, but not limited to, introducing glitches into games that didn't exist in the original data that was sent to the publisher. This includes at least one instance where the game would crash 100% of the time at a specific point because the publisher removed a music track and didn't erase the code that calls for that music track, adding typos and grammatical errors to dialogue that didn't exist in the original data that was sent to the publisher, changing the plot of their game without the dev's consent or without even informing them such a change was being made, which caused a plot hole in the sequel that the dev was in the middle of making the games easier by strengthening allies, weakening enemies, and or introducing new items / equipment / skills that were overpowered. Also, apparently puzzles had been changed to make them easier to solve. According to the publisher, all of these things were done to make the games better and more accessible. Unfortunately, the devs really couldn't do anything about it since they signed away all rights to the game for a measly $1,000. A bit of a different take on the question. TLDR, make others present you with proof you agreed to a contract before blindly accepting their assertion that you had one with them. My wife worked for a community college as a faculty assistant professor for the past 9 years. At the same time, she was working to complete her PhD and using the college's tuition reimbursement to assist with some of the fees. She decided to move on to a new position elsewhere and was told via email she would owe approximately $4,000 to reimburse the college for their tuition reimbursement payments. They informed her via email she needed to work there for 3 years after each payment in order to earn it. My wife asked to see where she had ever agreed to this in writing, and there was silence. No email response was received. On her official last day, she met with ours, and, at the end of the meeting, the ours rep admitted they had never followed any of their tuition reimbursement procedures with my wife, and none of the paperwork that was supposed to be completed, including informing my wife of the 3-year policy and her acceptance of it, had ever been presented to her. The ours rep said, "You'll receive an invoice for about $4,000 in the mail one day. What you do with it is up to you." So, This is really more of a thank God I asked them to present me with the contract moment than what was requested, but I think it's in the ballpark of what's being asked. A couple years ago my husband and I were looking to replace his car after an accident totaled it. We went to a dealership in New Orleans to test drive a specific car that we had checked out ahead of time. Even printed out the dealer's listing from their website so we could nail down the price we wanted. We got to the dealership and were immediately scooped up by their top man who had another sale going on at the same time. We handed him the listing and said it was the only one we wanted to see. He said sure and would have one of the training salespeople pull the car for us. The girl came and found us with the key. We checked it out and husband loved it. We got to the signing table and the price went from $13k to $16k. I asked to see the complete contract before we signed anything. It was the wrong freaking car. We were looking for a 2013 base model with less than 60k miles. They tried to sell us a 2010 luxury model with almost 230k miles. The top man came back just in time for the sale and tried to blame it all on the trainee. After a very heated discussion with top man about now taking our business elsewhere, since he tried to screw us, dealership owner graced us with his presence and said the one we were there to see was on loaner and they thought we would like this one better anyway. After even more arguing, we left and found a cheaper version of the luxury model in Little with only 80k miles for very near our price point. I finally have a story for one of these posts. Woohoo, doing my apprenticeship whilst at college. Was initially an 18-month course at college, not normal college, but 3 days on-site training at oil gas training, and 2 days in college. Got to the final month and the training apprenticeship scheme company said they were changing the course and adding another 2 months on for additional courses for us to have additional qualifications. No worries, right? Good for us. Yeah. They kept saying they would bring in new contracts this week, brought in part of paperwork that stated we agreed to all terms and conditions in the new contract, but they somehow forgot the new contract. All my college mates were away to sign. I, being the smart one, told them to hold off until we read the contract. Managers tried to bullshit us saying that nothing changed, ECT point blah blah. I stood my ground and they brought contract in 3 days later. I read it and 3 new things had been added. 1 point, any days off from now will constitute gross misconduct and you get flung off course straight away. 2. You agree to pay all training costs if you leave course at all during final 2 months. 3 point, they will not now guarantee you a job placement for the final 2 years of your apprenticeship offshore. Point, no one signed. Refused to do any work. Had to get the CEO of company involved to change it back to original and to guarantee us all job placements for final 2 years. Thank God I read that, or about 40% of my class would have been thrown off for days off. When I was in high school I bought some subwoofers for my car that came in a pre-made box. I was an idiot and didn't think to take into account the size of the box in addition to the 16-inch subwoofers when measuring my trunk to see if they would fit. Well, surprise surprise, they did not fit and I had to take them back to Circuit City for a refund. Point, I was in high school at the time and literally had just had a class a few weeks ago in which my teacher told us to always read a full contract before we sign it. Fortunately, that lecture resonated in my mind when they handed me a piece of paper at the return desk in order to process my return. It was a singular piece of paper, and on it, they said that by signing this paper, you agree to have a restocking fee deducted from your refund. I asked them how much the restocking fee would be, and they told me it would be something like $90 when the entire purchase was only $200. Christmas time sale. I told them to fuck off in a very polite way and ended up selling them as well as my amp on Craigslist for only a very minor loss. Also, remember Western Sky Loans? They ceased operations in 2013 because they were charging exorbitant rates for loans, even by payday company standards. A $10,000 loan from that would end up costing you $62,000 in the long run. Always read the fine print, people. Always. I just got a job and quit less than an hour into my first shift. Point, this resort, which caters to oil tycoon Texans and other obscenely rich people, had a job opening for a bartender. I'm on unemployment right now, So I figured I could make better money from rich people tipping me. I went to the interview and they asked me what position I was applying for, and I happily replied that I had applied for the bartending position. They said they had an opening in the kitchen and that they wanted me to do some shifts there. I told them that I had no kitchen experience and couldn't even handle the heat from being in a kitchen, and jokingly added that I'm the kind of guy that's more comfortable snowboarding in a t-shirt. Finished with I cannot work in a kitchen. They still hired me and told me my first shifts would be running bar back and food runner to learn the pose system. Pretty standard. I was fine with it, even if I made less tips for the first couple of days. I showed up at my first shift and they told me to go to the kitchen. What the fuck? I asked why I wasn't being trained on the pose like I was told. They said everyone does everything around here. I looked at the schedule and asked why every serving and bartending position was filled by a young woman and why none of those young women had a kitchen shift. I was told because they know how to serve and bartend. Faking? Really? I have done bartending and customer service in faking San Francisco and San Diego. What more experience have they gained at a 10-person per day resort in rural New Mexico? So I asked if I was even hired as a bartender and they said yes. I asked how many of my 5 shifts a week would be bartending shifts. They said I might get 1 bartending shift every 2 weeks. Asked, does the kitchen make tips? No, they do not. I walked downstairs and said I'm deciding not to work here. Thank God they were shady AF, and I'm pretty sure they tried to bring me on under the table. Didn't kill my unemployment. That actually pays me more than working there full time would have. On top of a 45 minutes commute. Fact, liars and cheats. I moved to Chicago a couple of years back. Within the first couple of months I was there, I got hammered with 3 expensive tickets, totaling $800, I think, all within one afternoon, for parking in a school zone. It was the summer. I was new to the neighborhood and the sign was pretty tough to read, but it seemed like I was in the wrong and probably wouldn't be successful if I tried to fight it. So I start looking into my payment options and learn about a payment plan program that the city was unveiling to help folks under financial hardship pay off their tickets. Though I wasn't totally destitute by any means, I had just moved to the city to start a PhD program and I didn't really have that kind of money just lying around. So I figure that I'll check this program out. As I'm reading up on the program, I read the fine print and learned that in order to enroll in it, you need to default on your ticket or tickets, which causes your fee to double. Then, you have to pay that new total in monthly installments. Had to scrounge up the cash to pay the tickets off, which wasn't easy, but I was very happy that I did my HW. For a program that was sold as this progressive policy to help struggling folks out, to have such a messed up clause in their fine print is downright predatory. I love Chicago, but Rahm Emanuel can seriously go fuck himself. Was trying to buy a used car. I researched how to do it, since I had never purchased a car before. Prevailing advice was to walk in with your own financing. Find a car that I liked. After several weeks of shopping, I had already notified them of my pre-approved financing, and they began running the finance paperwork. I realized as they start pushing things for me to sign that the APR was like 7 points higher than what I walked in with, and started asking questions. They tried to say it was because they couldn't get a hold of my financial institution of choice, but it was okay because I was approved by so many of these. I was suspicious, and I took the other advice I had read about car shopping. Don't be afraid to walk. I had run out of time before needing to be at work anyway, so it was good timing in that respect. During some downtime at work I got calls from the dealers saying they got a hold of my lender. Weird, since I was trying to call the lender I had chosen and got nothing. It then dawned on me, after listening to the message system, that I wasn't getting a hold of anyone because it was a bank holiday. That being the case, how is it that this car dealer had gone through back channels to presumably get a hold of them or anyone else? Fishy. The following morning I called the lender. They said they had been closed, so there was no back channel access. Since they had approved the dealer as someone they would do business with, they told me the dealer had to honor what they, the lender, offered to me, and if they didn't there would be follow up with CAB. I was given a phone number to call in case the dealer continued to try its funny business with me. I told my story to a guy that used to work at a dealership and he asked if anyone was celebrating and high-fiving me as I was leaving with my car. Nah, they were pretty bland. He then told me that means I got a good deal. No one was celebrating because I read the contract and made sure they honored the pre-approved deal with my lender, thus meaning they weren't getting 7 points extra on the back end. I merged with another business and combined offices into a larger suite in the same building. I was the 90% owner, my partner was 10% and close to retirement, or so he said. When we entered the lease I noticed a collection of little provisions that amounted to, if you breach the lease and don't cure in 3 days we keep your stuff. About a year later I make my final payment on the purchase and the seller tells me he is resigning, taking his clients, and setting up shop elsewhere. Same day the landlord comes over and gives me a BS eviction, then another and another. I'm swimming in eviction notices and can't possibly cure them. So I hire at least 20 people to move everything out of the company into a warehouse. All stock, all racks, all furniture, everything. Lawsuit happens next between myself and the seller, and as we are doing discovery I find that the seller and the landlord entered into a partnership and the guy I bought the company from is operating rent-free in the exact same spot I was evicted from. TLDR. Commercial lease says landlord can assume ownership of my stuff 3 days into a breach. Landlord and business partner started a competing company together and were stunned when I moved everything out on day 2 of a eviction, sued them and discovered their partnership. The last 2 times I bought a car at a dealership. I really hate car dealerships. Their sales tactics are fucking terrible and prey on people who don't fully understand what's going on by confusing the hell out of them. In both instances, I thought the payment estimate was too high, based on the math in my head, but trying to get the sales guys to explain what the hell they were doing is a losing battle, since I think their end game is to just try and confuse you. Anyways, I knew what the sales price was in both instances, so I just waited until talking to the finance people to sort both out. For the first one, we traded in a pretty crappy car. They gave us $2,600 for the trade-in on it, which is in the ballpark of what I wanted. I thought the payment quote the sales guy gave us seemed a little high, so I looked through the contract pretty closely once the finance guy had it ready. Sure enough, I was right. These goofballs had put my trade-in down in a way that it looked like I owed $2,600 on the vehicle, which was getting tacked onto the loan instead of them deducting that value from what needed to be financed. I'm still fairly sure they did this on purpose, but they so embarrassed by the mistake I got a couple of free oil changes out of it. For the second one, we were buying a previous year model they still had in stock. They had the price online, and I was fine with that price. I told them, when we went in, this is what I want. I'm fine with the price, and that I wanted to do the 0% financing option instead of the cash back. The sales guys just kept asking what I wanted my payment to be, which pissed me off, because they really are only trying to figure out whatever extended warranty bullshit they can fit into that number. I told them I wanted the car with the 0% and no extended warranties. Once again, they show me some really confusing set of numbers with what my payment would be. I thought it was $50 more than it should be, but once again decided to just sort it out with the finance guy. The finance guy tried blowing through everything real quick, but I caught that they had in fact added on an extended warranty which was making up the additional $50 in their payment estimate. Told them to take it off, and if he tried selling me one more thing I was just gonna get up and walk out. He finished up real quick and skipped over all the other bullshit he was trying to sell. Car dealerships are the worst. Got faked over, but better late than never. Signed a licensing contract with a publisher for 1 volume of an original work. He sent me a contract copy to review. I checked it out, and it looked good. Then he sent me a real one on nice paper to sign and return, and I did that. 1 year later he approached a friend of mine about licensing and publication, and they said no, and asked me what the fuck was up with the contract that was asking for lifetime rights to the work. I had a sinking feeling and checked. Yep, in the final draft I was sent, He changed one line from first volume to lifetime of the property for comparison. My first volume was complete at the time, but the entire property will take me decades to finish. Claimed we discussed it on the phone and I agreed. I would absolutely never. Spent the next few years weaseling my way out of it and got out. My eventual thank God I looked at the contract, but I can't even measure the damage my career took, and I don't like thinking about it. My other friends who were signed with him also fared worse than I did, and most of them took hits that lasted for several years as well, and did irreversible damage to their brands and audiences. His company is mostly dead in the water now, but last I heard he's only working with folks from second and third world countries, because they will sign anything. Point moral of the story: read every line of your contracts, and also try not to make agreements over the phone. Get it in writing. A lot of manipulative people actively avoid leaving a paper trail, so they can gaslight you later. My ex-wife and I went to buy her a new car. Went through the process, picked it out, negotiated the price and trade-in, did the paperwork, and away we went in her new car. This was a Sunday. The next day the dealership calls us and tells us they forgot to get us to sign a few things and asked us to come in. So we head up to the dealership that evening and the salesman slides over a few things. The X already highlighted. He tells me to sign in one spot, her to sign in another. As I was her co-signer, she didn't have the greatest credit at the time. Before I signed it, I noticed they switched our names around, me as the buyer and her as a co-signer. I turned it back around and pointed out the error. He brushed that off and just said it's fine, we just need your signatures and you are off. I told the guy I wasn't signing it and wanted to talk to the sales manager. Sales manager comes over and explains it to me. Basically on Sunday they can't get confirmation from the bank, so they basically go off our credit scores and assume the bank will be okay. Well, her credit wasn't strong enough even with me as a co-signer, but my credit was great and they would approve me. I flipped my sheet. They ran my credit again to see if the bank would approve me and tried to pull it over our heads. I told him I wasn't buying the car, I wasn't signing it. I would be in the market for a car in a few months and I didn't want a new car already on my credit when I went to buy mine. He told me they didn't have any choice and the bank wouldn't finance her, so I told them to bring her trade-in back around and we'll undo the deal. They went away for a while and came back telling me they would figure it out with the bank the next day. I told them they better not pull any sheet. I would be checking with the bank to make sure my name isn't listed. They assured me that wouldn't happen. In the end they must have done something, because my name didn't appear on the title or the loan other than co-signer. She was listed, and we never heard from them again.